Ash vessel. Part 1. The first patient. They brought him in just before dawn. A middle-aged man found slumped against a vending machine outside the terminal. Skin pink and flawless, as if asleep. The paramedics thought it was carbon monoxide at first. But when they tried to intubate him, the tube collapsed, no resistance, no organs. Only a faint drift of gray dust rose from his throat. Dr. Lira Voss stood over the body under the harsh fluorescence of the burn ward, watching monitors that displayed nothing. The temperature of the skin read normal. Pulse irregular but faintly present, as though the flesh remembered being alive. The first incision released no blood, only a sigh. Fine ash spilled from the opening, dry but strangely warm. The scalpel edge dulled where it touched the dust, leaving a faint scorch mark along the handle. The nurse muttered something about chemical residue, but Lira shook her head. No burns, no tissue collapse. She scraped a pinch of the gray substance into a dish. It shimmered faintly, like ground bone. She ordered samples for microscopy. The slides revealed hollow channels shaped like organs. But every cell wall had disintegrated, replaced by crystalline lattices that pulsed faintly when touched by light. The smell was faint, sweet and metallic. At 3:17 a.m. the morgue temperature fell to 12 degrees Celsius. The surveillance feed showed the patient's hand twitch once, fingers curling against the sheet. When Lira returned, the camera lights blinked. The body was still warm, but the ash on the table had shifted, spelling something faint across the steel. She leaned close, breath fogging over the letters. It read still inside. Part 2. The pattern of dust. By the end of the week, 4 more bodies arrived, each one perfect from the outside, each one hollow within. Their skin stayed warm for hours, soft as living flesh. But when cut, the insides drifted apart like burned paper. Dr. Voss began to chart the cases, hoping for a cause, a toxin, a pathogen, something measurable. The results made less sense with every test. The ash contained traces of carbon and calcium, but no biological residue, no DNA. Under magnification, the particles formed lattices that shimmered faintly when touched by sound. It was the intern who noticed first. He was cleaning the lab when he sneezed near an open tray, and the ash quivered, forming concentric ripples across the glass like a disturbed pond. For a moment, it almost breathed. Lira logged the observation, then returned to the cold room. The bodies lay in a row under linen sheets, identical in posture, their faces peaceful. She pressed a finger to one forehead. It was still warm. Too warm. She ordered infrared scans. The readings showed faint heat signatures. Not random, but pulsing, identical patterns across all 5 corpses. They glowed brightest in the chest cavities, and when overlaid on a map, the rhythm matched the frequency of a heartbeat. That night, she plotted the victims' home addresses. The pins formed a spiral around an abandoned crematorium outside the city, a facility closed since the 60s after a furnace explosion killed 6 workers. Outside, rain began to fall. But when it hit the morgue windows, it left gray streaks instead of clear ones. She touched the pane. The residue clung to her fingertip. Fine, dry, and faintly warm. When she wiped it away, she saw her own reflection in the glass. And just for a second, it exhaled. Part 3. Hollow voices. The morgue grew quieter each night. The kind of silence that hums in the airs. The refrigeration units whispered, the fluorescent bulbs buzzed faintly. But underneath those sounds, there was something else. A voice. The intern heard it first, a low vibration coming from the ultrasound machine. He thought it was feedback. Until it formed a rhythm. The monitor showed static waves pulsing in time with the whispers. When the signal was isolated, it produced a pattern that resembled breathing. Dr. Voss leaned close to the speaker. The sound was faint. A murmur caught between sigh and word. When slowed down, it almost formed syllables, gasps of speech that seemed to be saying something like in, out, in, out. The ashes on the tray trembled in response. The technician adjusted the gain. And one of the covered bodies twitched. Not violently. Just enough to shift the sheet. The movement left a fine mist of dust in the air. They ran another scan, this time focusing on the chest cavity. Beneath the ash lay hollow pockets that expanded and contracted in rhythm with the sound. The air inside was moving. The intern backed away, whispering that it looked like the lungs were breathing again. When he turned to leave, his breath fogged the glass door. For a second, there were two silhouettes reflected. His own. And another standing just behind him. He collapsed before anyone reached him. By dawn, his chest X-ray showed nothing but cavities where his lungs should have been. Still, his body was warm. And when Dr. Voss leaned near, she swore she heard him whisper, "It's still inside." Part 4: The reanimation attempt. By the fourth case review, Dr. Voss had abandoned the clinical tone in her notes. Every entry was written by hand now. Short. Unsteady. The words kept smudging where her gloves brushed against the gray dust. The ashes had begun to hum. Not loud. Just faint vibrations when the morgue lights flickered. The resonance matched the same breathing pattern recorded earlier. Lyra locked herself inside the lab after midnight. Against protocol. With one of the bodies. The chest cavity was empty, a hollow chamber lined with shimmering residue. She placed a saline bag on the counter, watching the fluid pulse through the four-line. When she pierced the chest with the needle, the ash stirred. A slow swirl began from the base of the ribs, folding and curling like smoke underwater. It rose, twisting itself into the shape of lungs. The fluid within the syringe vanished instantly, absorbed into the gray mass. The monitor flared alive. A pulse trace appeared. Steady. Human. The corpse's mouth opened slightly, and something like a sigh escaped. The exhaled vapor shimmered in the air, not smoke, but motes of light. Every metal surface in the room began to ring. Faintly, like tuning forks. The ashes responded, pulsing in waves that moved toward her. The noise grew louder. An irregular choir of breath and whisper. Then the heart cavity ignited, not with flame, but with light. A perfect sphere. Glowing white-hot, beating against nothing. Lyra staggered back, shouting for the others. But the intercom was dead. Her reflection in the observation glass blurred, split. Then looked back at her. Eyes glowing faintly. The body sat up. And for the first time, it inhaled. Part 5: The vessel awakens. Emergency power took 7 long seconds to return. In the dark, the lab sounded alive. Metal ticking as it cooled. Glass chattering softly. A rustle like dry leaves. When the light stuttered back to life, the tables were empty. The sheets had fallen to the floor in drifts of gray snow. Dr. Voss stood slowly. Her ears rang with the aftertone of that strange choir. The saline bag lay empty. The monitor still showed a pulse. Steady. Human. Yet there was no body connected to the line. A shape stood in the corner near the drain. At first she thought it was a coat hanging wrong. Too thin. Too long. Then it turned. The thing was all ash and light. Not a statue. Not a ghost. It looked like a human drawn from the residue of many people at once. Layered faces flickering inside its frame. It did not move except to breathe. The chest rose and fell. A measured rhythm that made the cabinet doors tremble. Lyra whispered hello without meaning to. The ash shifted. White eyes opened. They were featureless, burning like magnesium without heat. The vessel inhaled. The lights dimmed in a single wave across the room. The heart monitor flatlined as if its sound had been swallowed. Papers lifted from the counters. The air itself seemed to lean toward the thing's hollow mouth. When it exhaled, gray vapor filled the room. Each mote glowed like a firefly. In every particle she thought she saw a face. Opening and closing its mouth in a tiny silent plea. The vapor did not dissipate. It settled. It moved as though guided, flowing along vents and hallways. Slipping beneath doors. Down the corridor, alarms began to fail. Doors clicked open. Far away, a nurse shouted that the air had turned heavy. As if the building were breathing in. Lyra backed toward the intercom. The button did not respond. Her voice came back to her from inside the vessel. Multiplied, hollow, singing two notes at once. The sound wrote itself across the stainless steel wall in fine ash script. We are still inside. She remembered the map on her office wall. Pins spiraling around the old crematorium. The pattern was not an infection. It was a return, something that had been scattered was drawing itself back together. Bodies were never the point. The point was the vessel. She lifted a hand. The vessel tilted its head in the same motion, like a mirror that had learned to breathe. Within its chest the light sphere pulsed faster, as if excited by being recognized. The floor vibrated gently beneath her shoes. Voices gathered in the vents. 100 at first. Then hundreds more. Not pain. Not fear. But a kind of relieved exhalation. The sound threaded through the ductwork and down the stairwell toward the city. Lyra moved closer. The ash did not retreat. It smelled faintly sweet, like an extinguished candle. She wanted to touch it. She wanted to open it and see if there was a heart inside. You can carry us, the choir said without words. You can keep us warm. Her palm hovered over the vessel's chest. The light beat against her skin like a moth against